How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, October 25th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Juan Soto. The elite outfielder for the Washington Nationals turns 23 today, and my intention with this episode is, of course, to shed light on his accolades, his accomplishments, and what Juan Soto has been able to achieve in his very short yet very just amazing career in the MLB. This is a player that is most definitely on track to becoming one of the best baseball players of all time, let alone being a Hall of Famer. Of course, if everything stays true to course, of course, if he stays out of trouble with that's a lot of criteria that he has to adhere to. But in terms of skill and production, all he has to do is just keep doing what he's doing right now. The fact that he's just turning 23 and he's been known to lead the MLB in multiple categories even by now should be a testament to just like the type of player that he is. He's a player that can hit for contact. Of course, he's led the league in batting average. He can hit for power. He's led the league in on-base plus slugging percentage. Not to mention that he can run fast and he can play incredible defense. Wherever you really need Juan Soto, he's really kind of there. So just to get into a little bit of background, he's originally from Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. He would eventually find himself signing with the Washington Nationals as an international free agent in 2015 when he was barely even a teenager. He will go on to find himself playing or getting called up for the Washington Nationals in 2018. He was the youngest player in the MLB when he made his debut, and when he was 19 years old. He was the first player born in 1998 to appear in a major league game. In 2018, in his age 19 season, Juan Soto would end up starting 116 games for a Washington Nationals team that would finish with an 82-80 record. They completely missed the playoffs that year, but in Juan Soto's rookie season, he would make a name for himself. And in the 116 games he played, he finished with 121 hits, more hits than games played in his teenage season is a pretty big feat, considering he was 19 for the entire season, didn't turn 20 until, of course, October, way after the season when he wasn't even playing because they didn't make the playoffs. Out of the 120 hits he finished with, he did finish with 77 runs in the 116 game season, which is a lot. He finished with 25 doubles on the season. He finished with a triple. He had 22 home runs alongside 70 RBIs. And looking at what he did percentage-wise, he finished with a .292 batting average, which is an incredibly tough feat to do, especially as a rookie. He finished with a .406 on-base percentage. He's had an on-base percentage of above 40%, of above 400 all 4 of the years he's played in the MLB. And, of course, that streak started his rookie season. He finished with a .517 slugging percentage. He's also finished with a slugging percentage above 500 the last 4 years. Slugging percentage is basically the amount of total bases you accumulate divided by your at-bats. He finished with an OPS, which is an on-base plus slugging percentage, which is an aggregate of .923. All 4 seasons he's been in the league, he's had an OPS over 900, and of course it started there. All of this incredible season just for him to finish runner-up in the Rookie of the Year voting to Ronald Acuna for the Atlanta Braves, as Ronald Acuna did have a more impressive National League Rookie of the Year season, but just by a little. But Juan Soto was slightly edged out for that award. Regardless, in 2018, many people were starting to become aware of who Juan Soto is. Following his phenomenal rookie season, he would come back for his very first full season being played with the Washington Nationals. In 2019, in his age 20 season, he would play 150 games for a Washington Nationals team that finished with a 93-69 record. They finished with the second best record in the National League East and ended up making the playoffs that year. In the regular season itself, as a 20-year-old in the 150 games he played, Juan Soto finished with 153 hits. That's 3 more hits than games played. The second year in a row, he finished with more hits than games played. He finished with 110 runs, the first time in his MLB career he was able to score at least 100 runs on the season. He finished with 32 doubles, the only time in his MLB career to date he's eclipsed 30 doubles, and the second straight year he's finished with at least 25. He finished with 5 triples this season, the only time he's hit at least 5 triples in a season in his MLB career. He finished with 34 home runs and 110 RBIs. Both are still career highs at this moment in his career. He finished with 12 stolen bases, the only time in his career he's been able to finish with double-digit stolen bases. He finished the season with a .282 batting average, which is the lowest batting average he's ever had in a season to date. But considering his lowest batting average is .282, of course, that should speak even more to what he was able to do. He finished with a .401 on-base percentage, which is also his career low, in that stat. He'd finished with a .548 slugging percentage, which would be a couple ticks higher than the previous year. He's find his OPS, his on-base percentage for slugging, at 949. The second straight year it was above 900, and the second straight year his on-base percentage was above 400, and also the second straight year his slugging percentage was over 500. At the conclusion of the season, despite not being named an All-Star, Juan Soto would finish 9th in an MVP voting race that would eventually go on to see Cody Bellinger be named the MVP. Regardless, he would help lead the Washington Nationals to the playoffs. In their wild card game, they would end up beating the Brewers, as Juan Soto had a very big hit that series to help them make it to the National League Division Series. In the Division Series, they ended up beating the LA Dodgers to make it to the championship series. In the championship series, they ended up beating the St. Louis Cardinals. They swept the Cardinals to make it to the World Series. And once they made it to the World Series, they ended up beating the Houston Astros, the very same team that won the American League Championship Series this year. The last time they won it, they went on to lose to the Nats. But the Nats would go on to win their only title in franchise history, considering they've only been a franchise since 1969. Of course, that would be very big. So, of course, that is how their season would effectively finish out, as Juan Soto, in his very first playoff appearance, would go on to win, in his only playoff appearance in his career, will go on to win the World Series, and they were able to do so in just amazing fashion. Following Juan Soto's only World Series win, by then he wasn't even an All-Star yet, this would lead into the 2020 MLB season, a season that most people know was impacted by COVID to the point where the 162-game season had to get shortened to 60 games for every team, so you're taking 102 games out of it. But at the same time, they decided to expand the playoffs to include 8 teams from the American League and the National League rather than 5. Even though the Nats did not necessarily make the playoffs in 2020, Juan Soto had a virtuoso 2020 season. After originally having a false negative or a false positive COVID test, Juan Soto would end up playing 47 of the 60 possible games he could have played for a Washington Nationals team that finished the season with a 26-34 record. In the 47 games he played, Juan Soto finished with 54 hits. Third season in a row, he finished with more hits than games played. He finished with 39 runs in the 47-game season, which is an incredible ratio of runs to games played. He finished with 14 doubles on the season. He had no triples, but he had 13 home runs alongside 37 RBIs. He would finish with 27 extra base hits out of his 54 hits, which is exactly half of them. He would finish with 6 stolen bases, and then he would go on to lead the National League in batting average for the only time he's ever been able to do so in his career. He finished with a .351 batting average, the highest batting average he ever finished a season with, and the first time he was ever able to eclipse a batting average of 300. He was able to finish with a .490 on-base percentage, which is the third consecutive season he had an on-base percentage above 400. But .490 was by far the highest he's ever had in his career, even to date. And not to mention that he would lead the National League in it for the very first time. He would also lead the National League in slugging percentage for the only time in his career to date. He finished with a .695 slugging percentage, the third time in his MLB career that he would finish with a slugging percentage over 500, which is a very tough feat to do. And the only time he's finished with a slugging percentage over 600, and it was at .695, so it was way over 600. He would also finish the season with an 1185 on base with an 1185 OPS, which of course was by far the highest OPS in the National League, the only time he's ever led the National League in that stat. Not only is it the third time he's ever finished with an OPS above 900, it is the only time he finished with an OPS over 1,000 and even over 1,100. In the stat that measures OPS plus, which basically measures where you are compared to the rest of the league, whereas 100 is the average OPS, 101 means that your OPS is just one tick higher than the average MLB player. His OPS plus was 217. So, I mean, he was most definitely hitting at his own rate compared to all other players in baseball. This is the only time he led the National League in on-base plus slugging OPS plus. And he would also lead the National League in intentional walks. He was intentionally walked 12 times. At the conclusion of the season, they were not able to name All-Stars. So 3 years into his MLB career, Juan Soto was unable to pick up an All-Star nomination. However, he was named a Silver Slugger as an outfielder for the very first time and the only time in his MLB career to date so far. And he would also finish 5th in National League MVP voting in a race that saw Freddie Freeman from the Atlanta Braves take home the silverware. Following the 2020 season, which ended up seeing the Dodgers take home the World Series, that leads us into this past 2021 season that just finished. Juan Soto would go on to play 151 games for a Washington Nationals team that finished with a 65-97 record. They finished with the worst record in their division. And taking a look at Juan Soto's very first All-Star season, it would pretty much go hand in hand with the last full season that he played in the MLB, if not a lot better. He would finish with 157 hits in the 151 games he played. That is the fourth consecutive season, even to date, that he was able to finish with more hits than games played. He's 4 for 4 in that regard. He finished with 111 runs, which is one more run than he put up his second year in the league. So that is now his career high in runs, the second time he's ever been able to eclipse 100 runs in his career. He would finish with 20 doubles, the third time in his career he finished with at least 20 doubles in his career. He finished with 29 home runs alongside 95 RBIs, the second most home runs and RBIs he was able to put together in a season. He would also go on to lead the National League in walks. He finished with 145 walks on the season. The second time in his MLB career, he finished with at least 100 walks on the year. And he led the MLB in walks by a wide margin, the only time he's led the league in that statistical category. For the very first full MLB season where he's played at least 100 games, he would go on to finish with a batting average above 300. His batting average finished at .313 for the season. He would also finish with an on-base percentage of .465. This would be the second time he led the National League in slugging percentage in a row. And this would be the fourth season in the MLB, 4 for 4 in terms of the years he's been in the league, that he finished with a on-base percentage above 40%, which is incredibly high. He would also finish with a slugging percentage of .534, 4 for 4 in terms of seasons with a slugging percentage over 500. And he would also finish with an OPS of .999. This would be the highest in the National League, I believe. But he would finish behind Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in terms of on-base plus slugging percentage, and Bryce Harper. So he finished second in the National League, actually. But at the same time, this would be the fourth season in his 4-year career that he finished with an OPS above .999. Not to mention in the OPS department, which measures the average OPS of players, he finished with a .175 OPS. Hitting, of course, in the upper echelon of players as it comes down to how well he's been able to make it on base and how often he makes it to base. This season, he would also lead the National League in times he grounded into a double play. He grounded into a double play 23 times. He was also intentionally walked 23 times, which would go down as a National League lead for the second year in a row. And considering after all the stats that I've named that he's led the National League in between last year and this year was the only time that Juan Soto would be named an All-Star in a season where the Nationals had not even made it to the playoffs, considering that Juan Soto has already won a World Series at this point in his career. But of course, that is where we are at the conclusion of the 2021 season, as awards have not officially been named yet. The season is officially over, but considering we have two teams left competing for the title in the Atlanta Braves and the Houston Astros, it will be a matter of time before Juan Soto is eventually gifted the awards that he will be given at the conclusion of the year. But for now, that is where Juan Soto currently sits as a 23-year-old phenom in the game, who only has one All-Star to his name, but he has a lot of other things going for him as well. I, of course, want to take this time to thank the Pro Baseball Reference website, along with the MLB, and, of course, the necessary Wikipedia articles that I needed on his teams that he played for. And, of course, I want to thank everybody for listening to all 16 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well, and if you ever get a chance to watch Juan Soto, I recommend doing it. He wears number 22 for the Nationals, and it's very possible that we very well could see one of the best Hall of Fame careers play out in this dude. With that said, thanks for listening to this piece. I hope all is well. And once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are over, I will come back tomorrow on Tuesday, October 26th for another episode of The Elite. So until then, I'll catch you with another episode, and peace out. I'll catch you tomorrow.